Maria had lived alone on her ranch for almost 4 years, ever since her husband passed away. Every morning she woke before sunrise, tied her boots, and stepped outside with a long sigh that she tried to hide even from herself. The land was quiet. Almost too quiet. And the air always felt heavier, without another voice beside her. She handled her chores with steady hands, but her strength grew weaker each year. The fences leaned, the barn roof sagged, and the water pump coughed like an old man losing his breath. She knew the ranch needed someone stronger, someone who could fix things she no longer had the energy to repair. But she had no one left to call. The townspeople often said she was admirable. They praised her courage, saying it was impressive how she kept the land running alone. Maria only smiled politely when she heard such words. Inside, she felt tired. There were nights she cried quietly on her porch, wishing she had help but too proud to admit it. She felt the weight of loneliness every time she sat at her empty dinner table. Even the cattle sensed her mood. They watched her with slow, calm eyes, as if they understood she was fighting against time. One cold morning, Maria woke with the sun just touching the hills. She walked outside and saw a fence post broken in half. She stared at it for a long moment, feeling the wind cut across her face. She whispered to herself that she would fix it later, but she knew she didn't have the tools or the strength to do it alone. She returned to the house, made a cup of tea, and sat on the porch with her hands wrapped around the warm mug. She felt a deep ache in her chest that wasn't pain, but something like exhaustion mixed with loneliness. She wished life would give her a small miracle, even just one. Meanwhile, miles away, a rancher named Daniel stood outside a small shop in town. He was tall, quiet, and carried a tired sadness in his eyes. He had come to the town only a week earlier, looking for work. His wife had passed away a year ago, and he had been trying ever since to raise their little daughter on his own. The world felt heavy for him too. But he kept moving because of the small hand that always reached for his. His daughter Lily was the reason he woke every morning with hope, even if it was faint. When the shop owner asked Daniel about his plans, he explained simply that he needed steady work and a peaceful place where his daughter could feel safe. The shop owner leaned back and rubbed his chin. He told Daniel about Maria, the widow who was struggling to keep her ranch going. He said she didn't ask for help, but she clearly needed some. Daniel listened, quiet and thoughtful. Something inside him stirred something that felt like purpose. He thanked the shop owner, took the directions, and decided to visit Maria's ranch that very day. As they rode down the long dirt road, Lily sat beside her father holding her small bag. She looked out the wagon window with wide eyes, asking gentle questions about where they were going. Daniel told her they were going to meet a woman who might need help. Lily nodded with the innocence of a child who trusted her father completely. Daniel wasn't sure what to expect. He hoped the widow would be kind enough to listen. He needed work, but he also needed a place where Lily could feel less lonely. He knew she missed having a mother, though she never said it. He carried that knowledge like a quiet sadness in his heart. The road stretched far, with golden fields on both sides. Finally, Maria's ranch came into view, standing lonely but strong against the open land. Daniel slowed the wagon, studying the place. He noticed the broken fence, the tired barn, and the way everything seemed just a bit worn down. It reminded him of his own heart, a little damaged, but still alive. He parked near the porch, lifted Lily down gently, and walked to the door. Maria was inside, washing a small bowl, when she heard the knock. She frowned softly because unexpected visitors usually brought trouble. She dried her hands and opened the door cautiously. For a moment, she froze. A tall stranger stood before her, hat in hand, and beside him was a little girl with soft, curious eyes. Daniel spoke first. His voice was calm but firm, the voice of a man who carried many burdens but remained kind. He said he had been told she needed a rancher. Maria's mouth parted slightly in confusion. She hadn't asked anyone for help, yet here he was, standing on her porch with sincerity in his eyes. She didn't know what to say. Her eyes shifted to Lily, who was half hidden behind Daniel's leg. The small girl lifted her face enough for Maria to see her clearly. Her hair was messy from the long ride, and she held her father's shirt tightly. But she wasn't afraid, just shy. Something in Maria's heart softened at the sight. She hadn't seen a child up close in years. Daniel explained gently that he wasn't there to cause trouble. He didn't push himself into her home or demand anything. He just stood there, respectful and patient, waiting for her answer. Maria could feel her heart beating faster because she wasn't used to strangers offering help without wanting something in return. She had been cautious ever since losing her husband. The wind brushed across the porch, and Maria realized she had been silent too long. She stepped aside and quietly invited them in. The moment felt like opening a door not just to her house, but to something new. Daniel guided Lily inside. The little girl looked around with wide eyes, studying the wooden walls, the old furniture, and the small table near the window. Maria offered them seats and poured a little tea, though she only had enough for 2 cups. Daniel refused one politely, so Lily could have it. That small gesture made Maria's heart warm. She watched the little girl drink her tea slowly, her small hands wrapped around the warm cup. Maria asked Daniel why he came all this way. He explained his situation in simple words, without pity or drama. He said he was a widower, trying to find honest work and a stable place for his daughter. He said he heard she needed help and hoped she would give him a chance. Maria listened closely. She saw the truth in his eyes, the quiet sadness that matched her own. She also saw the hope he carried, not for himself but for the little girl beside him. After talking for a while, Maria decided to show them the ranch so Daniel could understand the kind of work required. She walked them through the land, pointing out the weak fences, the damaged barn door, and the old water pump. She apologized for the mess, but Daniel shook his head gently. He told her there was nothing to apologize for. Life was hard sometimes, and no one should be ashamed of needing help. Without saying another word, Daniel walked to the broken fence, knelt down, and began examining it. He pulled a small tool from his bag and started fixing one part. Lily helped by holding a nail, trying to be useful. Maria watched them both from a distance. She felt something unusual, something like comfort. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't fixing something alone. As the sun began to lower, Daniel stood up and wiped his hands. He didn't boast about his work. He simply explained what needed to be done next. Maria realized she was smiling, a small but genuine smile she hadn't felt in years. When they returned to the porch, Daniel finally spoke the sentence that stayed in her mind long after he left. He said he wasn't asking for much, just honest work and a safe place for Lily. He didn't want charity. He just wanted a chance. Maria nodded slowly. She felt a gentle shift inside her heart, as if life had finally answered her silent prayers. She didn't make a decision yet, but she knew something important had begun that day. Something that could change everything. The sky turned orange, and Daniel prepared to leave, promising to return the next morning if she wished to consider. Lily waved shyly, and Maria waved back, with soft eyes. When the door closed behind them and their footsteps faded, Maria stood alone in her quiet house. But for the first time in many years, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt full of possibility, full of something new, full of a hope she thought she had lost forever. Maria woke up early the next morning with Daniel's quiet words still echoing in her mind. She had spent most of the night thinking about the man and his little daughter. She wasn't used to guests, much less strangers offering help, but something about the way Daniel spoke, the way he carried himself, and the way Lily looked at her with soft, trusting eyes, something about all of it stayed in her heart. The morning air felt different, as if the ranch itself sensed that life was about to change. Maria stepped outside and began her usual chores. The sun was just rising, painting warm gold across the fields. She fed the chickens, checked the cattle, and then walked around the property, quietly repeating Daniel's words in her mind. He had said he didn't want charity. He just wanted honest work and a safe place for his daughter. She respected that. She also remembered how easily he had fixed that small part of the fence. His hands were steady, confident hands that had seen hard work all their life. Around mid-morning, she heard a wagon approaching from the road. She looked up from the barn and saw Daniel and Lily coming toward her. Daniel kept one hand steady on the reins while Lily sat beside him holding a small wooden box. When they reached the yard, Daniel climbed down and lifted Lily gently. The little girl smiled timidly at Maria, and Maria felt her heart soften all over again. Daniel greeted her politely and asked if she would still allow him to help around the ranch. Maria nodded, feeling her cheeks warm as she realized how relieved she was to see them again. She didn't want to seem too eager, but she could not deny the comfort their presence brought. She invited them inside for a simple breakfast. Her house was modest, but she made fresh eggs, warm bread, and tea. Daniel thanked her quietly, and Lily sat at the table with her small hands folded on the wooden surface. As they ate, Maria noticed how careful Daniel was with Lily, how he made sure she had enough food, how he softly encouraged her to eat slowly, how he placed comforting hands on her shoulder without saying many words. That small care spoke louder than everything else. After breakfast, Maria asked Daniel if he wanted to walk the ranch again. He said yes, and gathered a few tools from his wagon. Lily walked between them, sometimes holding Daniel's hand, sometimes walking quietly beside Maria. The child was shy but gentle, and Maria found herself asking Lily little questions about her toys, her favorite colors, and the places she had seen. Lily answered in soft whispers. It felt like listening to the wind, delicate but warm. They reached the old fence first. Daniel examined the rest of it, pointing out which parts needed replacing and which could be repaired. He worked slowly and carefully, as if he didn't want to rush or show off. Lily stayed close to him, handing him nails or holding wood pieces he asked for. Maria stood a few steps away, watching the two of them working together like they had done it for years. The sound of hammering echoed across the field. Maria realized that the ranch had not heard a man's steady work since her husband passed away. The sound felt comforting instead of painful. She felt something like relief spread through her chest. When they finished the fence, Daniel asked if he could check the barn next. Maria nodded and walked with him. The barn door had been weak for months. The hinges were loose, and every time Maria pushed the door open, she feared it would fall. Daniel inspected it silently, then opened his toolbox and began removing the old hinges. He replaced them with new ones he had brought. Maria watched with quiet admiration. The man didn't waste time or complain. He simply worked with a calm strength that made her feel safe in ways she hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, Lily wandered near Maria and began picking small wildflowers from the ground. She gathered them carefully in her small hands and gave them to Maria with a shy smile. Maria thanked her gently, touched by the child's innocence. She found herself smiling more than usual, her heart warming in ways she hadn't expected. By noon, the barn door opened smoothly again. Maria almost couldn't believe it. Something that had troubled her for months had been fixed in less than an hour. She thanked Daniel with genuine gratitude in her voice. He simply nodded and said he was happy to help. His humility made her respect him even more. They took a break for lunch. Maria spread a blanket under a shade tree near the house, and the three of them sat together. Lily ate her sandwich beside Maria, leaning slightly against her like a child seeking quiet comfort. Maria brushed Lily's hair softly without thinking. Daniel watched them with gentle eyes, grateful that his daughter felt safe with someone again. After lunch, Maria led Daniel to the water pump behind the house. It had been giving her trouble for weeks, sometimes working, sometimes refusing to release any water. Daniel studied it for a moment, then rolled up his sleeves. Lily sat on the grass nearby, humming as she played with sticks and stones. Maria stood next to Daniel, holding a small bucket and handing him tools when he asked. Daniel spent nearly an hour adjusting the pump. He tightened the loose bolts, cleaned the pipes, and replaced a small piece that had worn out. Finally, he told Maria to try pumping the handle. She hesitated before placing her hands on the handle and pushing down. To her surprise, clear, strong water flowed out. She laughed softly, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in a long time. Daniel looked at her with a small smile, the kind that formed gently without forcing. He said he was glad it worked. Maria felt a warm wave spread through her, realizing how long it had been since someone had helped her, without expecting anything in return. They continued walking around the ranch, discussing what needed to be repaired next. At some point, Maria told Daniel the truth that she had not asked anyone for help, and she wasn't sure how the shop owner had gotten that idea. Daniel said he understood, and he hoped he wasn't intruding. Maria shook her head quickly, telling him he wasn't intruding at all. She admitted, in a quiet voice, that she had been struggling more than she wanted to admit. Daniel told her gently that no one should have to carry everything alone. His words were simple, but they made something inside her heart feel lighter. As the afternoon sun began to lower, Daniel finished repairing several more small things around the ranch. Loose boards, broken handles, an old ladder. Lily followed him everywhere, occasionally giggling softly. Maria couldn't remember the last time she had heard a child's laughter on her land. It felt like a sweet, healing breeze. Before leaving, Daniel stood on the porch with Lily by his side. He told Maria he could stay for more days, weeks, even if she wanted him to. He said he wasn't in a rush, and he needed a place where Lily could feel safe. He added that he admired how strong Maria had been, caring for the ranch all alone for so long. Maria didn't answer immediately. She looked at the ranch, at the fields, at the barn, at all the things she had carried alone for years. Then, she looked at Daniel and Lily. The little girl smiled up at her with quiet hope. Maria finally nodded. She told him he could stay as long as he needed. She said she appreciated his help more than he knew. Daniel thanked her, with soft gratitude in his eyes. As they turned to leave for the evening, Lily reached out to hug Maria briefly. The little girl's tiny arms wrapped around Maria's waist in a shy, innocent gesture. Maria froze for a moment, surprised. Then she gently placed her hand on Lily's back. The moment felt warm, unexpected, and meaningful. That night, after Daniel and Lily rode away, Maria stood alone on her porch. But the loneliness felt different now. It wasn't cold or heavy. It felt like the beginning of something new, something hopeful. She breathed deeply and realized she was smiling again. Truly smiling. For the first time in many years, Maria didn't feel alone. The days that followed became some of the most peaceful Maria had known in years. Every morning she woke to the quiet sound of Daniel's wagon approaching. Lily would jump down with her little bag, always holding a small snack or toy, and Daniel would walk toward the barn with calm confidence. He never waited for instructions. He simply looked around, observed what was broken, and began working with a steady purpose. Maria found herself waiting for their arrival more than she admitted, even to herself. The first week passed gently. The ranch started changing in small ways, ways that felt like light after a long winter. The fences stood straighter. The barn smelled cleaner. The tools found their way back into organized shelves. And even the cattle seemed calmer. With Daniel moving among them, the ranch felt alive again. Maria felt alive again too. Daniel worked hard every day, but he never rushed. He took time to show Lily small things, like how to hold a hammer safely, or how to pet the horses without startling them. Sometimes Maria watched from a distance, her heart warming at the sight. Lily laughed more now. A soft, sweet sound that wrapped around Maria like sunshine. The little girl's steps looked lighter, as if she finally felt at home somewhere. Maria often walked beside Daniel during chores. She liked the comfortable silence that formed between them. They didn't need long conversations. Simple words were enough. But even in silence, they understood each other. Both had carried loneliness for years. And now, for the first time, someone walked beside them without forcing anything. One afternoon, when the sun was mild and the wind felt soft, Maria stood in the barn doorway, watching Daniel mend a broken stall. Lily was sitting nearby, drawing small shapes in the dust with a stick. Maria leaned on the doorframe and said softly, "You work as if you've lived here all your life." Daniel looked up with a faint smile. "Work feels different here," he said quietly. "Feels calmer. Feels honest." Maria felt her heart shift a little when he said that. She nodded and stepped inside to hand him a wooden board he needed. Their fingers brushed lightly, just for a moment, but it carried a gentle warmth. Both felt it, but neither said anything. It was too soon, too delicate, too meaningful to name. Later that day, they walked the field together to check on the cattle. Maria noticed that Daniel always walked on the side where the ground dipped slightly, as if making sure she wouldn't stumble. She didn't comment, but she noticed it. She noticed a lot of small things about him. The way he always listened fully when she spoke. The way he always kept Lily in sight. The way he never acted like he was owed anything. These small things made him different from anyone she had known before. As the weeks passed, the townspeople began to notice Daniel and Lily spending so much time at the ranch. They started whispering among themselves every time Maria went into town. Some people smiled kindly, but others let their curiosity turn into gossip. The widow found herself a new man. Someone whispered at the general store. "Moved on pretty quick, didn't she?" said another. They spoke loudly enough for her to hear. Maria returned home that day with a heavy heart. She wasn't ashamed of Daniel helping her. She wasn't doing anything wrong. But memories of judgment and misunderstandings from her past made her anxious. She feared Daniel would hear the rumors and think badly of her. She feared he might leave because of other people's words. That evening, after Lily fell asleep in the wagon, Maria quietly told Daniel what the townspeople had said. Her voice trembled slightly because she didn't want him to think she had caused trouble for him. Daniel didn't react with anger or frustration. He just listened, his eyes calm and steady as always. When she finished, he shook his head gently. "People talk when they don't understand," he said. "But you don't have to let their words hurt you. I know who you are. I know what you're trying to do. You're not alone in this." His words were soft, but they struck deeply. Maria felt a slow warmth rise through her chest. She hadn't heard words like that in years. Words filled with sincerity, not judgment. She thanked him quietly, trying not to let her emotions show too much. Daniel didn't push for more conversation. He simply placed his hand briefly on her arm, a gesture of comfort, and then climbed onto the wagon to take Lily home. That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She replayed his words again and again, each time feeling a little more steady, a little less alone. The next day, Maria woke early and began preparing biscuits for breakfast. She found herself setting aside a few extra pieces for Lily, without even thinking. When Daniel and Lily arrived, the little girl ran up to Maria with a small drawing. She had made a drawing of 3 people standing beside a house. Maria looked at it with surprise. Lily pointed at each figure and softly said their names. "Papa, me, you." Maria felt her breath catch. She knelt down and hugged the little girl carefully. Lily wrapped her arms around her neck and held on tightly, as if she didn't want to let go. Daniel stood nearby, watching with gentle eyes. There was something in his expression, something tender, something grateful. Throughout the day, Maria and Daniel worked side by side, repairing a section of the barn roof. At one point, Maria slipped slightly while climbing a ladder, and Daniel caught her arm quickly, steadying her without hesitation. She felt a rush of warmth and embarrassment, but Daniel didn't laugh or make a big deal of it. He simply said, "Careful," in a soft voice filled with genuine concern. Hours later, when they finished the roof, they sat on overturned buckets outside the barn, catching their breath while Lily played nearby with small stones. The air was warm, the sky painted in soft afternoon colors. Daniel looked out over the field and said, "I didn't expect to feel this peaceful here." Maria turned to him slowly. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, as if choosing careful words. "After my wife passed, I didn't think I could feel settled anywhere. Everything felt temporary, like we were always just passing through life. But here," he exhaled deeply, "here feels different." Maria felt the meaning behind his words, but she didn't push for more. Instead, she said softly, "Maybe this place needed someone like you." Daniel looked at her then, really looked at her, with a quiet understanding that made her heart flutter in a way she had almost forgotten how to feel. She lowered her eyes quickly, not wanting him to see the warmth rising on her cheeks. Over the next few days, their routine became natural, almost like a rhythm they shared without discussing. They worked in harmony, communicated with simple gestures, and found comfort in each other's presence. Maria learned that Daniel didn't talk much, but when he did, he chose his words with meaning. She learned that he always checked the skies before working outside, that he hummed softly to calm the horses, and that he always made sure Lily felt included. Daniel learned that Maria had a quiet strength, that she hid her fears behind steady hands, and that she cared more deeply than she let on. One evening, after a long day of repairing the last broken gate, they all sat on the porch steps eating warm bread Maria had baked. Lily leaned her head on Maria's shoulder and slowly drifted to sleep. Daniel watched them in the soft, dimming light. He looked thoughtful, almost emotional, but said nothing. Sometimes words weren't needed. Eventually, Daniel lifted his sleeping daughter in his arms. Before leaving, he turned to Maria and held her gaze for a moment longer than usual. In that silent moment, Maria felt something unmistakable, something gentle, something safe, something like hope. As the wagon rolled away, Maria stayed on the porch long after they disappeared down the road. She held her hands together tightly, staring at the horizon. The ranch no longer felt empty. Her life no longer felt silent. Something beautiful had begun growing. Slowly, naturally, without force. She didn't know where it would lead. She didn't dare imagine too much. But she knew one thing clearly. For the first time in years, her heart was no longer carrying its weight alone. Winter crept slowly across the land, painting the nights colder and the mornings crisp. The ranch that had once felt tired now looked alive, thanks to the steady work of Daniel and Maria. Every fence stood straight. Every barn door opened without resistance, and the fields seemed to breathe again. Maria walked through her home with a lighter heart each day, noticing small things she hadn't noticed before, the way the kitchen felt warmer when Lily sat at the table drawing, the way Daniel's tools were lined neatly near the barn, the way laughter occasionally echoed in places where silence once lived. She had grown used to their presence, though she still reminded herself they were guests, not truly hers to keep. Daniel and Lily continued to arrive every morning, their wagon wheels crunching softly over the dirt road. Each day began with small greetings, gentle smiles, and quiet moments that felt strangely like family life. Maria looked forward to those moments more than she admitted. She found herself making extra breakfast without thinking, brushing Lily's hair when it fell over her eyes, and listening to Daniel hum a soft tune as he worked. None of it was planned. It simply became part of the rhythm of her days. One morning, as Daniel repaired the roof of a small shed and Maria swept fallen leaves from the path, clouds began to gather above the ranch. At first, they looked harmless, light gray, soft, drifting. But by late afternoon, the sky darkened fast. The wind grew louder, pushing cold air across the fields. Maria looked up with worry. She knew storms in this region could be sudden and dangerous. Daniel noticed too. He climbed down from the shed quickly, his jaw set with concern. "This storm looks bad," he said. "We should check the barn." Maria nodded. She could feel fear rising inside. Her fear not for herself, but for the animals and for the child who had become precious to her. Lily stood near the porch, clutching her small blanket, her eyes wide as thunder rumbled in the distance. The three of them rushed toward the barn. The wind whipped fiercely, almost pushing them sideways. Daniel checked the doors and windows, making sure everything was secured. Maria gathered the smaller tools left outside and carried them in. The horses inside paced nervously, their ears twitching at the sound of the storm building overhead. Just as they began to relax, a sudden crack echoed across the ranch. A large piece of the barn roof had been ripped off by the wind. Through the open section, rain started pouring in, hitting the ground like cold needles. A frightened calf, trapped by fallen wooden boards, cried out from inside the barn. Maria gasped. Daniel's eyes sharpened with urgency. He didn't hesitate for a second. He rushed toward the fallen boards, but the wind was so strong that Maria had to push forward with all her strength just to keep up. "Stay close behind me," Daniel said firmly, shielding Maria with his body as they moved through the chaos. They reached the calf. It lay shaking, its eyes wide with fear. Daniel lifted one heavy board, but another was pinned against the calf's small leg. Maria knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she tried to push the wood. Together, they managed to free the frightened animal. Daniel lifted the calf carefully in his arms and carried it to the far corner of the barn where the ground was dry. Maria placed her hand on the calf, murmuring soft comfort. Thunder cracked again, louder this time, shaking the barn walls. Both Daniel and Maria looked at each other, breathing hard. Their hair was wet, their clothes soaked, but their eyes held the same fierce determination. When they were sure the animals were safe, they turned back toward the barn entrance. The storm outside raged with violent winds and sheets of rain. Lily stood at the doorway, crying softly and calling out for them. Her small voice pierced the noise. Maria rushed to her, wrapping her arms around Lily as the child pressed her face against Maria's shoulder. Daniel followed, closing the barn doors tightly behind them to keep the storm from tearing them off. Maria held Lily close, whispering gentle words to calm her. The girl's small body shook with fear, but slowly, she began to relax in Maria's warm embrace. Daniel watched them, his chest tightening with emotion he couldn't fully name. They stayed inside the barn for nearly an hour, listening to the wind scream outside. Rain hammered the roof like an angry drum, but in the midst of the storm, something unexpected happened. Daniel sat down near Maria, and Lily crawled onto both their laps, her head resting against them. The three of them sat together in the dim barn light, their closeness forming a quiet, protective circle. When the storm finally weakened into a soft drizzle, Daniel stood up and checked the outside. The sky had cleared enough for them to return to the house. He lifted Lily in his arms, and Maria walked beside him, their steps tired but steady. The storm had caused damage, but they were safe. That mattered most. Inside the house, Maria wrapped Lily in warm blankets and made her a cup of hot milk. The child leaned against Maria, refusing to let go. Daniel sat nearby, his clothes still damp, watching the two with a deep, quiet gratitude. He had always feared something might happen to Lily in this new life they were trying to build. But watching Maria hold his daughter with such care made him feel a trust he had not felt in years. As the evening fell, Lily eventually fell asleep in Maria's arms. Maria carried her to the couch and placed a pillow under her head. When she stood up again, Daniel was watching her with eyes full of emotion, soft, honest, vulnerable. "You saved her today," he said quietly. You kept her safe. Maria shook her head gently. We saved each other, she murmured. All of us. Daniel stepped closer. The room was warm, lit only by the soft orange glow of the lantern. He wasn't a man who spoke many words, but in that moment, he found the courage to express what had been growing inside him for weeks. This place, you, Lily, everything feels different here, he said. I feel like we belong. If you'll have us. Maria's breath caught. She had been trying not to hope too much. She had told herself that Daniel would eventually move on, find other work, find another place. But now, hearing him speak with such sincerity, her heart swelled with a quiet joy she didn't dare show all at once. You both are already part of this place, she replied softly. And part of my life. Daniel looked down for a moment, collecting himself. When he lifted his eyes again, they were warm and steady. I don't want to leave, he said. Not because I need work. Because this feels like home. Maria felt her heart tremble at his words. She nodded slowly, feeling tears gather in her eyes, tears she tried to blink away. She wasn't used to crying in front of anyone. But tonight was different. Lily stirred slightly in her sleep, shifting closer to the warmth of the blanket. Maria brushed the child's hair from her face. Daniel watched the tender gesture with a full heart. He stepped closer, not too close. Not rushing. Just enough to show that he meant every word he said. Thank you, Maria, he whispered, for giving us a place to breathe again. Maria smiled softly, feeling an indescribable sense of peace. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she gently placed her hand on his arm in a gesture of understanding. Daniel covered her hand with his, their fingers meeting in the quietest, gentlest way possible. Outside, the storm had ended completely. The moonlight settled over the ranch like a blessing. The broken pieces from the storm could be fixed. The fear had passed. What remained was something deep, something true, something that had grown slowly between them, without either of them forcing it. In the silence of that warm, gentle moment, they both knew what life had given them. Not just help, not just company, but a new beginning, a family built not from chance, but from kindness, trust, and the simple decision to not walk through life alone anymore.